The day Helena Dalton's mother died was the last day it rained in Georgetown, Texas, and that was 3 years ago in the summer of 1877. Helena stood in the general store, watching dust motes dance in the thin sunlight that filtered through the grimy windows. At 23 years old, she had grown accustomed to the weight of hostile stares that followed her wherever she went in this dying town. The shopkeeper, Mr. Peterson, kept his distance as she placed her meager purchases on the counter. 2 pounds of flour, a small tin of coffee, and a spool of thread. He rang up her items without meeting her eyes, his jaw tight with barely concealed contempt. "That will be $2, he said flatly. Helena counted out the coins from her worn leather purse, her fingers steady despite the knot in her stomach. She had learned not to show weakness, not to let them see how their hatred cut into her like broken glass. "Your kind ought to leave," Peterson muttered as she gathered her parcels. "Maybe then God would see fit to bless us again." She did not respond. What could she say that would make any difference? The townspeople had decided long ago that she was cursed, that her very presence was an affront to the heavens. Her mother, a woman who practiced folk medicine and spoke to plants and animals, had been branded a witch by the more superstitious residents. When she died and the rains stopped, the superstition became certainty in their minds. Helena stepped out onto the dusty main street of Georgetown, squinting against the harsh glare of the relentless sun. The Williamson County heat bore down on everything like a hammer on an anvil. The wells were running low, crops had failed for the 3rd year running, and cattle were dying in the fields. She understood their desperation, but understanding did not make their cruelty easier to bear. She walked past the saloon where men lounged in whatever shade they could find, their eyes tracking her movement with undisguised hostility. Someone spat into the dirt as she passed. Another made a sign against evil. Helena kept her head high, her spine straight. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her cower. The small house she had inherited from her mother sat on the eastern edge of town, a half-mile from the nearest neighbor. It was a lonely place, but she preferred the solitude to the constant judgment. The garden she tended was brown and struggling despite her best efforts. She had hauled water from the creek every day, trying to keep at least a few vegetables alive, but the creek itself was little more than a trickle now. Helena had just set her parcels on the kitchen table when she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching. Her heart quickened with instinctive fear. Nothing good ever came from unexpected visitors. She moved to the window and peered through the faded curtains. A lone rider approached on a dusty sorrel horse. He sat tall in the saddle, his broad-brimmed hat shading his face from the sun. Even from a distance, she could see the easy confidence in the way he rode, the natural grace of a man who had spent his life on horseback. He was not from Georgetown. She knew every face in this town, and this man was a stranger. The cowboy reined in his horse at the edge of her property, near the dried-up flower bed her mother had once tended. He dismounted with fluid ease, looping the reins over the fence post. He was tall, with broad shoulders and lean hips, dressed in worn denim and leather. As he walked toward the house, she could see his face beneath the hat. He was younger than she had first thought, perhaps 26 or 27, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. Helena did not wait for him to knock. She opened the door before he reached the porch, keeping one hand on the frame, ready to slam it shut if necessary. "Miss Helena Dalton?" he asked, and his voice was warm and deep, with a hint of something she could not quite place. Kindness, perhaps. It had been so long since anyone had spoken to her with anything resembling courtesy that she almost did not recognize it. "Who is asking?" she replied, keeping her voice level. The stranger removed his hat, revealing warm brown eyes that studied her with frank interest, but no hint of the malice she had grown accustomed to seeing. "My name is Cole Xavier. I have come a long way to speak with you if you will hear me out. I cannot imagine what business you would have with me." "It is about the drought," Cole said simply, "and about what people are saying about you and your family." Helena felt her jaw tighten. "Then you have wasted your journey." "I have heard everything there is to hear on that subject, and I have no desire to hear more." She started to close the door, but Cole held up a hand in a placating gesture. "Please, Miss Dalton, I am not here to accuse you of anything. Quite the opposite, in fact. I believe I know what has really caused this drought, and I believe I can help end it." Despite herself, Helena hesitated. There was something in his eyes, a sincerity that caught her off guard. "You are either a fool or a charlatan," she said, but she did not close the door. "Perhaps a bit of both," Cole admitted with a slight smile that softened his weathered features. "But I am also a man who has studied weather patterns and land management across 3 territories. I have seen droughts before, Miss Dalton, and I have seen them end. This has nothing to do with curses or witchcraft. It has everything to do with the land and how it has been treated." Helena found herself intrigued despite her better judgment. "How did you even hear about me? Word travels in the cattle trade." "I was up in Dallas when I heard talk of a town in Williamson County that was convinced a witch's daughter was holding back the rain. The story troubled me enough that I decided to come see for myself." He shifted his weight, glancing at the dead garden. "I have seen this before, Miss Dalton. Not the superstition, but the drought itself, and I have seen it broken." "Come in," Helena said, surprising herself with the invitation, "but leave your gun outside." Cole glanced down at the revolver on his hip, then nodded. He unbuckled the gun belt and hung it over the porch rail before following her into the small house. The interior was neat and spare, with herbs hanging from the rafters and well-worn furniture that spoke of genteel poverty. Everything was clean despite the dust that seeped in through every crack and crevice. Helena poured water from a pitcher into 2 tin cups and handed one to Cole. He drank gratefully, then settled into the chair she indicated. "Tell me what you know about the land around Georgetown," Cole began, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "Before the drought, I mean. What was the vegetation like? The wildlife?" Helena studied him for a long moment, trying to understand his angle. "There were more trees along the creeks. Cottonwoods and pecans, mostly. The grass was tall enough to brush your stirrups when you rode through it. We had deer, wild turkey, all manner of birds. The wildflowers in spring were so thick you could not walk without crushing them. And now, the trees are dying. The grass is sparse and brittle. The animals have moved on or died. You can see it for yourself." Cole nodded slowly. "I have seen the same pattern in other places. Tell me, did anything change in the years before the drought? New ranches, large cattle herds moved in?" Helena thought back, her brow furrowing. "There was a cattle baron from Dallas who bought up several thousand acres north of here. He brought in huge herds, more cattle than the land had ever supported before. That was about 5 years ago. And the townspeople, did they expand their farming? Clear more land?" "Yes," Helena said, the memory becoming clearer. "My mother spoke against it, actually. She said they were taking too much from the land, not letting it rest. They called her crazy, said she was standing in the way of progress." She paused, a bitter smile crossing her lips. "I suppose that was when they really started to turn against her." Cole set down his cup and met her eyes. "Your mother was right, Miss Dalton. The land here has been overgrazed and overfarmed. The natural grasses that held moisture in the soil have been destroyed. The trees that provided shade and drew water up from deep underground have been cut down. The land is dying not because of any curse, but because it has been pushed past its capacity to support life. Even if what you say is true, Helena said quietly, why would anyone believe it? It is easier to blame a witch than to admit they have brought this on themselves. The rain will come, Cole said with quiet conviction. The weather will change eventually, whether we do anything or not. But if we can help the land heal, if we can show these people how to work with nature instead of against it, then when the rain does come, it will have something to nourish. The drought will truly end, not just pause for a season. Helena wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that there was a way out of this nightmare that did not involve her being driven from her home or worse. Why are you doing this? What is in it for you? Cole was quiet for a moment, his eyes searching her face. I lost my family's ranch in Colorado to drought when I was 19. We did not understand what we were doing wrong until it was too late. My father died still believing God had abandoned us, never knowing we had brought it on ourselves through ignorance. I have spent the years since then learning everything I could about the land, about sustainable ranching and farming. I cannot save my father's ranch, but maybe I can help save places like this. Maybe I can keep other families from suffering the way mine did. The raw honesty in his voice touched something deep inside Helena. She saw her own grief reflected in his eyes, the same loss and loneliness she carried every day. The townspeople will not listen to me, she said. They would sooner hang me than hear me out. Then we will make them listen, Cole said firmly. We will show them proof they cannot deny. We will start small with your land here and we will bring it back to life. When they see what can be done, they will have to listen. That could take months, Helena protested. How can you stay here that long? What about your livelihood? Cole smiled, and there was something warm and determined in that smile that made Helena's heart skip in an unexpected way. I hire out as a ranch hand when I need money. I have saved enough to carry me through for a while. Besides, I have nowhere more important to be than right here. Over the following days, Cole proved himself to be a man of his word. He camped on Helena's property, sleeping under the stars with his bedroll near the dying garden. Each morning before dawn, Helena would wake to find him already at work. He studied the land with an intensity that fascinated her, walking every inch of her small property and the surrounding areas, examining the soil, the few remaining plants, the patterns of sun and shadow. He talked to her about things she had never considered before, how certain native grasses had root systems that went down 15 feet or more, creating channels for water to penetrate deep into the earth. How those same roots prevented erosion and held precious topsoil in place. How the relationship between plants and animals and land was a delicate balance that had taken thousands of years to establish, and only a few years of carelessness to destroy. Helena found herself drawn to him in ways that both thrilled and frightened her. It had been so long since anyone had treated her like a human being rather than a pariah. Cole spoke to her as an equal, valued her opinions, asked about her mother's knowledge of native plants and folk remedies. He was interested in everything she knew, from which plants indicated good soil to how her mother had made medicines from local herbs. They worked side by side in the brutal heat, and Helena discovered that Cole was not just knowledgeable but also strong and capable. He dug trenches to redirect what little water runoff there might be when rain eventually came. He planted native grass seeds he had brought with him, varieties that were drought-resistant and would help restore the soil. He showed her how to create small berms that would capture and hold moisture. It will not look like much at first, he told her one evening as they sat on her porch, watching the sun set in a sky empty of clouds. The land has been wounded. Healing takes time. Helena studied his profile in the golden light, the strong line of his jaw, the way his eyes seemed to look beyond the present into some future only he could see. "You really believe this will work?" "I know it will work," Cole said, turning to meet her gaze. "I have seen it happen. And I believe something else will work too." "What is that?" "Us," he said simply. "You and me working together, proving them wrong." Helena felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the temperature. "Mr. Xavier, I do not think—" "Cole," he interrupted gently. "Please call me Cole. And before you say what you are about to say, I want you to know something." He shifted to face her more fully, his expression earnest. "When I rode into Georgetown and asked about you, you know what I heard? I heard about a stubborn, prideful woman who refused to leave even though the whole town wanted her gone. I heard about someone who tended a dying garden in the middle of a drought, who hauled water by hand to keep a few vegetables alive, who held her head high when lesser people would have crumbled. I heard about strength and determination and a refusal to give up. That is what brought me to your door, Helena Dalton, not pity but admiration. No one had spoken to Helena like that since her mother died." The words cracked something open inside her, some protective shell she had built around her heart. "They say terrible things about me," she whispered. "They say I am cursed, that my mother danced with the devil and I carry his mark." "Let them say what they want," Cole replied. "I know what I see when I look at you. I see a woman worth fighting for and a cause worth believing in. The rain will come, Helena, and so will our love if you will let it." The declaration hung in the air between them, bold and impossible and utterly sincere. Helena wanted to believe him, wanted to trust in the possibility he offered, but fear held her back. "You do not know what you are saying. You do not know what it is like to be hated by everyone around you." "Then teach me," Cole said quietly. "Let me stand beside you and face it with you. You do not have to carry this burden alone anymore." Tears stung Helena's eyes, and she blinked them back fiercely. She had promised herself years ago that she would not cry, that she would not give the townspeople the satisfaction of seeing her break. But here in the privacy of her porch, with only this earnest cowboy as witness, she felt the walls beginning to crumble. "I am afraid," she admitted in a whisper. Cole reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. When she did not move, he took her hand in his. His palm was rough with calluses, warm and solid. "So am I," he confessed, "but I would rather be afraid and try than safe and full of regret." That night, Helena lay in her bed and thought about Cole Xavier sleeping under the stars outside her window. She thought about his words, his conviction, the way he looked at her like she was something precious rather than cursed. She thought about the possibility of not being alone anymore, of having someone who believed in her and stood with her. It was a dangerous hope, but she could not seem to let it go. The next morning brought unwelcome visitors. Helena was drawing water from the well when she heard the sound of multiple horses approaching. Cole emerged from checking his trench work, his eyes narrowing at the sight of 5 riders coming up the road. The man in the lead was Samuel Morton, one of the wealthier ranchers in the area, and the most vocal about his belief that Helena was responsible for their troubles. He was a thick-set man in his 50s with a florid face and mean little eyes. The men flanking him were ranch hands, rough men with guns on their hips. "Miss Dalton," Morton said, not bothering with the courtesy of dismounting. "I see you have acquired yourself a visitor." "My guests are my own business, Mr. Morton," Helena replied, keeping her voice steady. Cole walked up to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. Morton's eyes flickered to him with barely concealed hostility. "Who might you be, stranger?" Morton demanded. "Cole Xavier. I am helping Miss Dalton with her land." Morton laughed, a harsh bark of sound. "Helping her with her land? Boy, you must be simple. That cursed patch will not grow anything but trouble. Best you move along before her bad luck rubs off on you." "The only bad luck around here is ignorance and superstition," Cole said calmly. "This land can be healed. I have already begun the work." The other rancher's face darkened. "You calling me ignorant?" "I am saying that blaming a woman for a natural disaster is both ignorant and cowardly," Cole replied, his voice still even but with an edge of steel beneath it. "The drought has natural causes, and it will have natural solutions. Miss Dalton has done nothing wrong. Her witch mother cursed this land." One of the ranch hands spat. "Her mother was a healer and herbalist who understood the land better than any of you," Cole shot back. "If you had listened to her warnings about overgrazing and deforestation, you might not be in this situation now." Morton's hand moved toward the rifle on his saddle. Helena's breath caught, but Cole did not flinch. He stood his ground, his hand resting casually near his own gun, which he had started wearing again after the first day. "You have no idea what you are talking about, boy," Morton growled. "We have been ranching this land for 20 years. And you have been destroying it for just as long," Cole said. "But it is not too late to change course. I can show you how to manage your herds in a way that will let the land recover. How to rotate grazing areas, how to maintain water sources, how to work with the natural ecosystem instead of against it." "I do not need lessons from some drifting cowboy," Morton sneered. But Helena noticed that his hand had moved away from the rifle. Cole's calm confidence had thrown him off balance. "Maybe not," Cole acknowledged. "But your cattle need water and they are not getting it. Your range is turning to dust and it is not coming back. You can keep blaming Helena or you can start looking for real solutions. Your choice." The standoff stretched for a long moment. Finally, Morton spat into the dust and wheeled his horse around. "You are a fool, Xavier. When this land swallows you up, do not say you were not warned." He and his men rode off, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake. Helena let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "That was dangerous," she said quietly. "So is doing nothing," Cole replied. He turned to look at her and she saw concern in his eyes. "Has he threatened you before?" "Everyone threatens me in one way or another. Mostly they just make it clear I am not welcome. A few times, things have been thrown at my house. Once someone tried to burn down my garden shed, but the wood was so dry it burned out before doing much damage." She tried to smile, but it felt brittle. "I have learned to be careful." Cole's jaw tightened. "That is going to stop. I will not let them terrorize you anymore." "You cannot fight the whole town, Cole." "Maybe not," he agreed. "But I can give them something else to think about. Come on, I want to show you something." He led her to the northern edge of her property, where he had been working for the past 2 days. Helena gasped when she saw what he had created. Using rocks and carefully shaped earth, he had constructed a series of small terraces that followed the natural contours of the land. In each terrace, he had planted different varieties of native grasses and plants. "This is called contour terracing," Cole explained. "When rain comes, the water will flow down the slope and be caught in these terraces instead of running off and causing erosion. The plants will hold the soil in place, and their roots will create channels for the water to penetrate deep into the ground. Over time, this will help recharge the underground water sources." "It is beautiful," Helena breathed, seeing not just what it was but what it could become. "It is a beginning," Cole said. "And I want to create something bigger, something visible from the road, something that will make people curious. If we can get even a few of them interested, if we can show them proof that restoration is possible, we might be able to turn the tide of opinion." They spent the rest of the day working on expanding the terrace system. It was back-breaking labor in the relentless heat, but Helena found she did not mind. Working beside Cole, hearing his easy conversation and occasional laugh, Feeling the brush of his hand when he helped her move a heavy stone, it all felt like the most natural thing in the world. As they worked, he told her stories about his travels, about ranches he had worked on from Colorado to New Mexico, about landscapes he had seen and people he had met. He had a gift for description that brought his words to life, and Helena found herself laughing at his tales of ornery cattle and stubborn ranch owners. "You make it sound like an adventure," she said as they took a break in the shade of her house. "It has been, mostly," Cole admitted. "Lonely sometimes, but never boring, although I think my wandering days might be coming to an end." "Why is that?" He looked at her with those warm brown eyes, and Helena felt something flutter in her chest. "I think I might have found a reason to stay in one place." Helena felt heat rise to her cheeks again. She was not accustomed to this, to being looked at with desire and affection instead of fear or hatred. It made her feel vulnerable in a way that was both frightening and exhilarating. "Cole," she began, but he held up a hand. "You do not have to say anything," he said gently. "I know this is fast, and I know you have every reason to be cautious. I just want you to know that I am not going anywhere. However long it takes, whatever obstacles we face, I am here." That evening, Helena cooked supper for both of them, a simple meal of beans and cornbread, but Cole ate like it was a feast. Afterward, they sat on the porch again as the sky turned from gold to purple to deep blue. The stars emerged one by one, brilliant in the clear, dry air. "Tell me about your mother," Cole said softly, "if you want to." Helena was silent for a long moment, gathering her thoughts. She so rarely spoke about her mother to anyone. "She was kind," she finally said, "and wise. She knew things about plants and animals that she learned from her grandmother, who learned from hers. She could look at a person and know what herbs they needed to feel better. She helped birth half the babies in this county, including some of the same people who turned against her." "What happened to turn them against her?" "Fear, mostly. She knew things they did not understand, and that frightened them. When she warned about the land being overused, when she spoke against the big cattle operations and the clearing of timber, she made powerful people angry. They started calling her a witch, started spreading rumors. By the time she died, most of the town believed she was evil." Helena's voice caught. "She died of a fever. I nursed her for 3 days, but nothing helped. Her last words were telling me to be strong, to not let them break my spirit." Cole reached over and took her hand. "She would be proud of you." "I hope so. I try to live the way she taught me, to see the good in the land and in people, even when it is hard to find. But some days, Cole, some days I am so tired of being hated for no reason." "I know," he said quietly, squeezing her hand. "But you are not alone anymore, and I promise you, Helena, we are going to change this. We are going to prove them wrong." She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe him. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm that Helena had never experienced before. She and Cole worked together from dawn until dusk, transforming her small property bit by bit. He taught her everything he knew about land management and restoration, and she shared her mother's knowledge of native plants and their properties. They became partners in the truest sense, each one's knowledge complementing the other's. But it was more than just work. As they labored side by side, Helena felt herself falling for this quiet, determined cowboy who had ridden into her life and refused to be scared away. She fell for the way he looked at her, like she was the most fascinating person he had ever met. She fell for his gentle humor and his unshakable optimism. She fell for the way he treated her with respect and kindness, never once making her feel like she was less than she was. Cole, for his part, made no secret of his growing affection. He would find excuses to touch her hand or brush against her as they worked. He brought her wildflowers he found on his morning rides, bright splashes of color in the brown landscape. He told her she was beautiful when she was covered in dust and dirt from a day's work, and the way he said it made her believe him. One evening, about a month after he had arrived, they were standing at the fence line watching the sunset when Cole turned to her. "Helena," he said, his voice serious. "I need to tell you something." Her heart skipped. "What is it?" "I am falling in love with you," he said simply. "Actually, I think I have already fallen, completely, utterly, hopelessly in love with you, and I need you to know that before we go any further." Helena felt tears spring to her eyes. "Cole, you do not have to say anything back," he interrupted gently. "I know you have been hurt and I know you need time. I just could not keep it inside anymore. You deserve to know how I feel." "I do have to say something," Helena insisted, her voice trembling. "I have to tell you that I feel the same way. I fought against it at first because I was afraid. I am still afraid. But yes, Cole Xavier, I love you too." The smile that broke across Cole's face was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. He reached up to cup her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the roughness of his calloused palms. "May I kiss you?" he asked softly. "Yes," Helena breathed. The kiss was everything a first kiss should be, tender and sweet and full of promise. Helena had been kissed before, years ago when she was still welcomed in town, but nothing had prepared her for this. For the way her heart felt like it might burst from her chest, for the way the world seemed to fall away until there was nothing but her and Cole and this perfect moment. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "The rain will come," he whispered, "and our love will grow with it. I promise you that, Helena. I promise you everything." She believed him. For the first time in 3 years, she let herself believe in the possibility of happiness. But happiness in Georgetown, Texas, was not meant to be simple or easy. 2 days after their first kiss, trouble arrived in the form of Reverend James Holloway and a group of townspeople. Helena heard them coming and felt her stomach drop. There had to be at least 20 people, more than had ever come to her house before. Cole was out checking the fence line. Helena was alone as she stepped onto her porch to face the crowd. Reverend Holloway was a thin, severe man with gray hair and eyes like chips of ice. He held a Bible in one hand and pointed at Helena with the other. "Helena Dalton," he intoned in his pulpit voice, "we have come to give you one final chance to repent of your sins and leave this town in peace." "I have committed no sins that require repentance," Helena said, keeping her voice steady despite the fear racing through her veins. "You harbor evil in your heart, just as your mother did," Holloway continued. "You have brought a curse upon this land, and you consort with a stranger who speaks blasphemy against the will of God." "Cole Xavier speaks truth, not blasphemy," Helena shot back. "The drought has natural causes, and he is working to restore the land. If you would open your eyes, you would see the work we have done." "We see the work of the devil," a woman in the crowd shouted. "This land is dying because it has been misused," Helena said, raising her voice to be heard over the murmurs of agreement. "My mother tried to warn you years ago. She told you that you were taking too much, pushing too hard. But you would not listen. Now you want to blame me rather than face your own mistakes." "Lies and more lies," Holloway hissed. "We demand that you leave Georgetown by the end of the week, or we will take action to remove you ourselves." "That is enough," Cole's voice rang out across the yard. He strode toward the crowd, his hand resting on his gun in a way that was not quite threatening but definitely noticeable. The crowd shifted nervously. "This is not your fight, stranger," Holloway said. "Anything concerning Helena is my fight," Cole replied firmly. He moved to stand beside her on the porch, a solid presence at her shoulder. "And I am telling you all right now that she is not going anywhere. This is her land, her home, and she has every right to be here." Samuel Morton pushed forward through the crowd. "You think you can stand against all of us, boy? I think you are all so desperate to blame someone for your troubles that you have lost your minds," Cole said. "Look at what we have done here. Really look." He gestured toward the terraced areas, the planted grasses, the carefully constructed water management systems. "We are bringing this land back to life. In a few months, when the weather finally breaks and the rains come, this property will be green while the rest of your land is still struggling. Do you know why? Because we are working with nature instead of against it. The rain will never come as long as she is here," someone in the crowd called out. "The rain will come regardless," Cole countered. "Weather patterns are cyclical. This drought will end eventually no matter what any of us do. But when it does, will your land be ready to receive that moisture? Or will the water run off your overgrazed, compacted soil and cause flash floods instead of nourishing your crops? I can help you prepare. I can teach you what I have learned. But first, you need to let go of this superstitious nonsense and face reality." "Who are you to lecture us?" Morton demanded. "I am someone who has watched good land die because people did not understand what they were doing to it," Cole said, and there was a raw edge to his voice now. "I am someone who learned these lessons the hard way. And I am someone who cares enough about this woman and this land to fight for both of them. So yes, I will lecture you, and I will keep lecturing you until you start listening to reason." The crowd was muttering now, uncertain. Cole's passion had clearly caught them off guard. Holloway sensed he was losing control of the mob. "Do not let his smooth words deceive you," the Reverend urged. "He is as tainted as she is. They are probably fornicating out here, adding sin upon sin." Helena felt her face flush with anger and embarrassment. Cole's hand found hers, his grip warm and reassuring. "My relationship with Helena is honorable and pure," Cole said coldly, "and it is none of your business regardless. Now I am asking you all politely to leave this property. We have work to do, and we have wasted enough time on ignorance and prejudice." For a tense moment, the standoff held. Then, slowly, some of the people in the back of the crowd began to turn away. A few others followed. Morton and Holloway held their ground, but as more and more of their followers drifted off, they too eventually retreated, though not without venomous looks back at the porch. When they were finally gone, Helena sagged against Cole, her legs suddenly weak. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her tight. "That was terrifying," she whispered into his chest. "I know, but you stood strong. I am so proud of you." He pulled back to look at her face. "They are getting desperate. That means we are getting to them. They could come back with guns next time. Then we will be ready. I will not let them hurt you, Helena. I swear it." She believed him, but she also knew that believing might not be enough. The town's hostility had reached a fever pitch. Something would have to break soon. That break came from an unexpected direction. 3 days after the confrontation, a stranger rode into Georgetown. He was a well-dressed man in his 40s, riding a fine black horse and leading a pack mule loaded with equipment. He went directly to the land office and then to the mayor's office, causing quite a stir in the small town. Helena and Cole heard about it when they went into town for supplies that afternoon. The shopkeeper, usually so hostile, actually spoke to them voluntarily for the first time. "Fellow named George Whitmore just rode in," Peterson said, almost grudgingly. "Says he is some kind of expert on droughts and land management. The mayor sent for him weeks ago after reading about his work up in Kansas." Cole and Helena exchanged glances. "What does he want?" Cole asked. "He wants to assess the situation, figure out what is causing the drought to persist. Mayor is hoping he can find a solution." Peterson paused, then added in a lower voice, "There is talk that if things do not improve soon, the whole town might have to be abandoned." Wells are almost dry. People are starting to leave already. Helena felt a complicated mix of emotions. Part of her wanted to feel vindicated, to let the town that had tormented her collapse under the weight of its own ignorance. But another part, the part that remembered growing up here, that remembered her mother delivering babies and healing the sick, that part mourned what was being lost. They finished their shopping and headed back toward Helena's house, but before they reached the edge of town, a voice called out behind them. "Excuse me, you there with the wagon?" They turned to see the newcomer riding toward them. George Whitmore had a weathered, intelligent face and keen eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He reined in his horse and tipped his hat politely to Helena. "George Whitmore," he introduced himself. "I am here to study the drought situation. I have been asking around, and several people mentioned that there is a fellow on the edge of town doing some kind of restoration work." "Would that be you, sir?" Cole nodded. "Cole Xavier. This is Helena Dalton. We have been working on restoring her property using sustainable land management techniques." Whitmore's eyes lit up. "Is that so? Would you mind if I came to see what you have done? I have been studying similar techniques in other drought-stricken areas." "You are welcome to visit," Helena said, her voice careful. She was not sure what to make of this man yet. Whitmore followed them back to Helena's property. And for the next 2 hours, he walked every inch of the land with Cole, asking detailed questions and taking copious notes. He examined the terracing, studied the native plantings, and tested the soil in various locations. "This is excellent work," he finally pronounced, standing with his hands on his hips and surveying the property with satisfaction. "You clearly understand the principles of sustainable land management, Mr. Xavier. Where did you study?" "Life," Cole said simply. "Hard experience and a lot of observation." Whitmore nodded approvingly. "Sometimes that is the best teacher." "Tell me, have you presented any of this work to the town leaders?" "The town leaders think Helena is a witch who cursed the land," Cole said bluntly. "They are not interested in hearing anything from either of us." Whitmore's eyebrows shot up. He turned to Helena. "Is that true, Miss Dalton?" "Yes," she said quietly. "They blame me for the drought. They have made my life here very difficult." The expert's face darkened with anger. "That is absolutely ridiculous, and it is precisely the kind of superstitious thinking that prevents real solutions." He looked between them, then seemed to come to a decision. "I want to help you. More than that, I want you to help me. I am going to be presenting my findings to the town leaders and the major landowners in 3 days. I would like you both to be there, to show them what you have accomplished here." "They will not listen," Helena said. "They will listen to me," Whitmore said firmly. "I have credentials from the Department of Agriculture and letters of reference from 3 governors. The mayor sent for me specifically because he trusts my expertise. When I tell them that you are doing important restoration work and that the drought has nothing to do with curses, they will have to listen." Hope, fragile and tentative, bloomed in Helena's chest. Could it really be that simple? Could the nightmare finally be ending? The next 3 days were a flurry of activity. Whitmore visited several times, taking photographs of their work with a large camera he had brought. He interviewed them extensively about their methods and made detailed sketches of the terrace systems and plantings. He also examined other properties around Georgetown, taking soil samples and water measurements. On the day of the presentation, Helena dressed carefully in her best dress, a simple blue cotton that her mother had made for her years ago. Her hands trembled as she pinned up her hair. Cole came to the house to collect her, looking uncomfortable but handsome in clean denim and a pressed shirt. "Are you ready for this?" he asked gently. "I do not think I will ever be ready to face all those people at once," Helena admitted, "but I will do it anyway." He took her hand and brought it to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles. "Whatever happens, we face it together." The meeting was held in the town hall, a large building that doubled as a church on Sundays. When Helena and Cole arrived, the room was already packed. Every rancher, every business owner, every person of influence in Georgetown and the surrounding area seemed to be present. A hostile murmur rose when Helena entered, but Cole kept his hand on the small of her back, steady and reassuring. Whitmore stood at the front of the room with the mayor, a nervous-looking man named Samuel Hutchins. When everyone had settled, Whitmore began his presentation. He spoke with authority about weather patterns and soil composition, about water tables and natural ecosystems. He showed his photographs and sketches, comparing healthy land with degraded land. He explained in terms even the most stubborn could understand how overgrazing and poor land management had created the conditions for the drought to persist. "Droughts are natural phenomena," he said clearly. "They come and go in cycles, but their severity and duration can be greatly affected by how we treat the land. What has happened here in Williamson County is a perfect example of human activity making a natural drought far worse than it needed to be." He paused, letting that sink in, then continued. "But I have good news. The damage is not permanent. With proper management, this land can be restored to health, and I have seen with my own eyes that such restoration is already underway." He gestured to where Helena and Cole sat. Every eye in the room turned to them. "Miss Helena Dalton and Mr. Cole Xavier have been doing exemplary work on Miss Dalton's property," Whitmore continued. "They have implemented techniques that will not only help that land recover, but will serve as a model for the entire region. I have inspected their work personally, and it represents the cutting edge of sustainable land management." The room erupted in disbelief and argument. Reverend Holloway stood up, his face red. "That woman is a witch. Her mother cursed this land." "There are no such things as witches," Whitmore said flatly, "and curses are superstitious nonsense. What Miss Dalton's mother was trying to tell you before she died was that you were damaging the land through overuse. She was right, and you should have listened to her. That is blasphemy." Holloway sputtered. "That is science," Whitmore corrected, "and if you want this town to survive, you had better start embracing science over superstition." He looked around the room. "The rain will come. Weather patterns are already shifting. I expect precipitation to resume within the next 3 to 6 months. But when that rain comes, what will happen? If your land is as compacted and degraded as most of what I have seen, the water will run off instead of soaking in. You will have flash floods and erosion instead of crop growth. Unless you start implementing the same techniques that Miss Dalton and Mr. Xavier are using, you are still going to lose your ranches and farms, rain or no rain." That got their attention. The room fell silent as people absorbed this information. Samuel Morton stood up slowly. "You are saying that even when it rains, we are still in trouble." "Unless you change your practices, yes," Whitmore confirmed. "But the solution is at your fingertips. I am recommending that the county hire Mr. Xavier as a consultant to help implement these restoration techniques on a larger scale. And I am formally declaring that Miss Dalton is in no way responsible for the drought and should be treated with the respect and courtesy any citizen deserves." Mayor Hutchins looked around the room, gauging the mood. He was a politician first and foremost, and he could see which way the wind was blowing. "I move that we accept Mr. Whitmore's recommendations," he said. "All in favor?" There was a pause, and then hands began to go up. Not everyone voted yes. Holloway and Morton both voted no, and several others followed their lead. But the majority carried the day. Helena felt tears streaming down her face before she even realized she was crying. Cole's arm came around her shoulders, pulling her close. "It is over," he whispered. "Helena, it is over." But it was not quite over yet. As the meeting broke up and people filed out, several townspeople approached Helena with shamefaced apologies. Mrs. Henderson, who had helped Helena's mother birth 4 children, clasped Helena's hands with tears in her eyes. "I am so sorry," she whispered. "I should never have believed those awful things. Your mother was a saint and I treated you terribly. Can you ever forgive me?" Helena found that she could. The anger she had carried for so long seemed to be flowing out of her with her tears, leaving behind something softer. "I forgive you," she said, and meant it. Not everyone apologized. Holloway and Morton left in stony silence, still clinging to their prejudices. But enough people reached out that Helena felt the weight she had been carrying begin to lift. Over the following weeks, Cole became the busiest man in Williamson County. With Whitmore's endorsement and the county's official backing, he began visiting ranches and farms throughout the area, teaching the same restoration techniques he had implemented on Helena's land. It was exhausting work, and he often came home to Helena's house covered in dust and barely able to stand, but he was happy. "We are making a difference," he told Helena one evening as they sat on her porch, which had become their favorite spot. "I can see it already. The land is responding." Helena smiled at him, her heart full of love for this man who had given her back her life. "You are making a difference," she corrected gently. "We," Cole insisted, taking her hand, "we are making a difference together. I could not have done any of this without you, without your mother's knowledge and your courage." As summer gave way to fall, something miraculous began to happen. The sky, which had been pitilessly clear for so long, began to show clouds. At first, they were thin and high, barely more than wisps. But gradually they grew thicker, darker, more promising. The first drops of rain fell on an October afternoon. Helena was in her garden, tending the native plants that were beginning to establish themselves when she felt it. A single drop on her arm, then another on her cheek. She looked up at the sky in wonder. "Cole," she called out. "Cole, come quickly." He emerged from the barn where he had been repairing a harness, took one look at her face and then at the sky, and let out a whoop of joy. The rain was falling faster now, still light but steady, the most beautiful sound Helena had ever heard. Cole ran to her and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around as the rain fell on both of them. They were laughing and crying at the same time, holding each other as the miracle they had worked so hard for finally came to pass. "You were right," Helena said, pulling back to look at his face. Rain dripped from his hair and eyelashes, and he had never looked more handsome to her. "You said the rain would come, and it did. And I said our love would come too," Cole replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Helena Dalton, I love you with everything I am. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life standing beside you, working this land, building a future together?" "Yes," Helena breathed. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He kissed her there in the rain, a kiss full of promise and passion and the future stretching out before them. The rain fell steadily, soaking into the carefully prepared soil, filling the terraces and trenches, beginning the long process of healing the land. They were married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony at the church, with George Whitmore serving as Cole's best man. Most of the town attended, a marked change from the hostility Helena had faced just months before. Mrs. Henderson made the wedding cake, and several other women contributed food for the celebration afterward. As Helena stood beside Cole and spoke her vows, she thought about her mother and how proud she would have been. She thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment, the pain and loneliness and fear, and how all of it had led her to this man who saw her for who she truly was. The rain continued on and off through the fall and into winter. By spring, the transformation was dramatic. Helena and Cole's property was lush and green, the terraces overflowing with native grasses and wildflowers. The creek ran strong and clear. The land was healing, just as Cole had promised it would. Other properties in the county were also showing improvement, especially those where the owners had followed Cole's advice. The contrast between well-managed land and neglected properties was stark and undeniable. Even Morton and a few other holdouts finally came around and asked for Cole's help. Cole worked tirelessly, and Helena worked beside him when she could. But by the following summer, she had another occupation. She was pregnant with their first child. "How are you feeling?" Cole asked her one evening as they sat on their porch, watching fireflies dance in the twilight. It had become a ritual for them, this quiet time together at the end of each day. "Tired," Helena admitted, her hand resting on her slightly swollen belly. "But happy. So happy, Cole." He put his arm around her and pulled her close. "I never imagined I could feel this content. After losing my family's ranch, I thought I would just wander forever, helping other people but never having a home of my own. Then I heard about a woman in Georgetown, Texas, who needed someone to believe in her, and everything changed." "I needed you," Helena said softly. "I was so lonely, Cole, so tired of fighting alone. And then you rode up and refused to leave, and suddenly everything seemed possible again." "I am never leaving," Cole promised. "This is where I belong. Here with you, on this land we are healing together." Their son was born the following March, during a gentle spring rain that seemed to bless his arrival. They named him Thomas James Xavier, after Cole's father and Helena's father, both long dead but not forgotten. He was a healthy, robust baby with his father's brown eyes and his mother's determined chin. Holding her son while Cole sat beside her on the bed, his arm around them both, Helena felt a peace she had never known before. The darkness that had shadowed her life for so long had finally lifted. She was loved, her son was healthy, and the land outside was green and thriving. Over the next few years, Georgetown transformed from a dying town to a thriving community once more. The sustainable land management practices that Cole introduced became standard throughout the region. Other experts came to study what they had done, and Cole found himself traveling occasionally to teach others what he had learned. But he always came home to Helena and Thomas, and later to their daughter, Mary Ellen, born when Thomas was 3 years old. The house that had once stood lonely on the edge of town became a center of warmth and hospitality. Helena, no longer shunned, became known as a healer like her mother before her, using her knowledge of herbs to help her neighbors. People came to her for advice and remedies, and she gave freely of her knowledge. Cole built a barn and acquired a small herd of cattle, which he managed according to the principles he had spent his life learning. He proved that sustainable ranching was not only possible but profitable. Other ranchers came to him for advice, and he became a respected voice in the community. Reverend Holloway eventually left Georgetown, unable to accept that his dire prophecies had been wrong. Morton stayed but kept largely to himself, a bitter man who never fully admitted his mistakes. But most of the town embraced the new way of thinking, grateful to have been given a second chance. On the 5th anniversary of the day Cole had ridden into Helena's life, they stood together on their porch as they had so many times before. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. In the distance, they could see their cattle grazing on lush grass. Closer to the house, Thomas was playing in the dirt with wooden horses Cole had carved for him, while Mary Ellen dozed in her mother's arms. "You ever regret it?" Helena asked quietly. Giving up your wandering life to settle down here." Cole looked at her with such love that it still made her heart skip even after 5 years of marriage. "Not for a single moment. This is everything I ever wanted, even when I did not know I wanted it." "You are everything, Helena." "I love you," she said, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I love the life we have built. I love our children. I love this land that we brought back from the edge of death." "The land was never dead," Cole said thoughtfully. "It was just waiting for someone to understand it, to work with it instead of against it. Like you were waiting for someone to see past the lies and the fear to the amazing woman underneath." "We saved each other," Helena said. "Yes," Cole agreed. "We did." As the sun slipped below the horizon and stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they stood together in comfortable silence, watching their children play, listening to the sound of water trickling through the restored creek bed, breathing in the scent of growing things. The drought was long over, and so was the loneliness and fear that had once defined Helena's existence. The town that had blamed her had learned to embrace her. The cowboy who had promised rain had delivered not just precipitation, but hope and healing. Their love had grown alongside the land, putting down deep roots that would last a lifetime. Years later, when Thomas was 17 and Mary Ellen was 14, and 2 more children had joined the family, Helena sat on that same porch with silver threading through her dark hair. Cole, graying at the temples but still strong and vital, sat beside her as he always had. "You remember what you said to me that first day?" Helena asked, watching the sunset paint the Texas sky in brilliant colors. "You said the rain would come, and so would our love." Cole smiled, taking her hand in his. The calluses were still there from a lifetime of work, but his touch was as gentle as ever. "I was right about both." "You were right about everything," Helena said softly. "You gave me back my life, Cole. You gave me a future when I thought I had none." "We gave each other everything," Cole corrected, bringing her hand to his lips. "And I would do it all again in a heartbeat." Their children were grown, or nearly so. Thomas was learning to manage the ranch, applying his father's principles with the same dedication Cole had shown. He had his mother's gift with plants and his father's understanding of the land. Mary Ellen had inherited her grandmother's healing gifts and was studying with a doctor in Austin, planning to return to Georgetown as its first woman physician. The younger children, Samuel and Grace, were still finding their paths, but showed the same strength and compassion their parents had modeled. The ranch had prospered beyond anything they had imagined. Other properties in the region had followed their example, and Williamson County was now known as a model of sustainable land management. George Whitmore had written extensively about their work, and visitors came from as far away as California to see what they had accomplished. But more important than any of that was the love that had sustained them through everything. The love that had started on a dusty road when a desperate cowboy had believed a woman no one else would trust. The love that had grown through hardship and triumph, through the birth of children and the passing of seasons, through rain and drought and everything in between. Helena looked at Cole, at the man who had changed her life completely, and felt the same flutter in her chest that she had felt the first time he kissed her all those years ago. Time had not diminished what they felt for each other. If anything, their love had only grown deeper and stronger. "I am glad you came to Georgetown," Helena said softly. "So am I," Cole replied, his eyes warm with memory and affection. "Best decision I ever made." They sat together as night fell, watching stars emerge in the vast Texas sky, listening to the sound of their family inside the house, feeling the contentment that comes from a life well lived and love well earned. The drought was a distant memory now, a story they told their grandchildren about hard times overcome through perseverance and faith. But more than that, it was the story of how love had bloomed in the most unlikely of places, how two lonely souls had found each other and built something beautiful together. It was a story of healing, of the land and of the heart, of prejudice overcome and hope restored. As Cole wrapped his arm around Helena and she leaned into his embrace, both of them knew that this was what happiness looked like. Not perfect, not without its challenges, but real and deep and lasting. The cowboy had been right all those years ago. The rain had come, bringing life back to the parched earth. And their love had come too, bringing life back to two hearts that had almost given up hope. The story of Helena and Cole became legend in Georgetown, passed down through generations as a reminder that courage and love could overcome even the darkest times. Their descendants still worked the land according to the principles Cole had established, still practiced the healing arts that Helena had learned from her mother. The house on the eastern edge of town, no longer lonely but surrounded by family and friends, stood as a testament to what two people could accomplish when they refused to give up. And on warm summer evenings, when the rain fell gently on the green Texas hills, people would remember the cowboy who had promised that rain would come, and the woman who had waited for someone to believe in her. They would remember that love and determination and the willingness to see beyond superstition to truth could change everything. Years turned into decades, and eventually Helena and Cole grew old together, their love never diminishing but only deepening with time. They faced the challenges of aging as they had faced everything else, together and with grace. When Helena's health began to fail in her 78th year, Cole never left her side. He held her hand through long nights, told her stories of their life together, reminded her of every moment of joy they had shared. "I am not afraid," Helena told him one evening as they sat together in the bedroom they had shared for over 50 years. Outside, a gentle rain was falling, nourishing the land as it had done so faithfully since that miraculous day so long ago. "Neither am I," Cole said, though his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "We have had such a good life, Helena. So good." "The best," she agreed, reaching up to touch his weathered face. "Thank you for finding me, Cole Xavier. Thank you for refusing to give up on me when everyone else had." "Thank you for letting me stay," Cole replied, his voice breaking. "Thank you for loving me back." Helena passed peacefully in her sleep 2 nights later, with Cole holding her hand and their children gathered around them. The whole town mourned her loss, remembering the girl who had been unjustly blamed and the woman she had become, beloved healer and pillar of the community. Cole lived for 3 more years after Helena's death, tending the land they had restored together, teaching his grandchildren the lessons he had learned over a lifetime. He spoke of Helena every day, keeping her memory alive with stories of her courage and kindness and strength. When Cole's time came, on a spring morning very much like the one when their son had been born, he went peacefully in his sleep with a smile on his face. Those who found him said he looked happy, as though he had seen something wonderful in his final moments. The family liked to think he had seen Helena waiting for him, ready to begin the next chapter of their journey together. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a sky that promised rain. The headstones were simple, bearing their names and dates and a single inscription that Cole had requested years before. Together they healed the land and each other. The story of Helena Dalton and Cole Xavier lived on long after they were gone. It became more than just a tale of drought and rain, more than a story of sustainable land management and superstition overcome. It became a love story, passed down through generations as a reminder that true love can transform everything it touches. Their descendants continued to work the land, honoring the principles Helena and Cole had established. The ranch prospered through good years and bad, always resilient because it was managed with wisdom and care. The town of Georgetown thrived, no longer the dying community it had been in that terrible drought summer of 1880, but a place of life and growth and possibility. And on summer evenings when the rain fell gently on the Texas hills, people would remember the woman who had been blamed for a drought and the cowboy who had promised that both rain and love would come. They had been right to believe in each other, right to hold on to hope when hope seemed foolish. Their love had been as nourishing to their hearts as the rain had been to the parched earth, and both had lasted, sustaining life and bringing beauty to a world that desperately needed both. The house on the eastern edge of Georgetown still stood generations later, renovated and expanded, but still recognizably the place where it had all begun. Visitors came from around the world to see where the famous sustainable ranching movement had started, where two people had proven that working with nature instead of against, it was not just possible but essential. But more than the historical significance, people came to see the place where a great love story had unfolded. They walked the same paths Helena and Cole had walked, sat on the porch where the couple had spent countless evenings, and felt the presence of something lasting and true. Love like theirs did not die with the people who created it. It lived on in the land they had healed, in the children and grandchildren they had raised, in the example they had set for how to live with courage and compassion. The drought that had nearly destroyed Georgetown became, in the end, the catalyst for its salvation. Without that desperate time, Cole might never have come to town. Helena might have remained isolated and alone. The land might have continued to be misused until it truly was beyond saving. But the drought brought change, and change brought Cole Xavier riding into town with solutions that seemed impossible and promises that seemed foolish. He had been right about everything. The rain had come, returning with the changing weather patterns just as he had predicted. The land had healed under their careful stewardship, and their love had grown and flourished, proving stronger than superstition, deeper than prejudice, and lasting far beyond their mortal years. In the end, it was a story of hope. Hope that love can be found in the most unlikely places. Hope that people can change and grow and overcome their worst impulses. Hope that the land, when treated with respect and understanding, will respond with abundance. Hope that two people, working together with determination and faith, can change not just their own lives but the lives of everyone around them. The rain continued to fall on Georgetown, Texas, nourishing the land that Helena and Cole had loved so well. And somewhere, in the way the wind whispered through the grass and the rain pattered on the roof of their old house, people liked to think they could still feel the presence of that love, eternal and unbreakable, a reminder that some things truly do last forever. The cowboy had promised that rain would come, and so would their love. Both promises had been kept, blessing the land and the people for generations to come. It was a legacy worth remembering, a story worth telling, a love worth celebrating. And in Georgetown, Texas, they did all three, keeping alive the memory of the woman who had been blamed and the man who had believed in her, and the love that had saved them both.